Hey there, and welcome to Beyond the Veil. I'm here to help you drift off into a peaceful sleep, offering soothing stories and gentle guidance. Before we settle into dreamland, let me know in the comments, which country are you from? And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more restful nights. Sweet dreams. Sarah clutched the keys to apartment 3B, the cool metal a stark contrast to her sweaty palm. A new city, a new job, a new life. It all hinged on this. She'd scoured listings for weeks, desperate for something within her meager budget. Point 3B wasn't exactly glamorous. The building itself, the Grandview Arms, was more, slightly past its prime arms, but the rent was unbelievably low. And the location was surprisingly decent, just a short bus ride from her new office downtown. The building's lobby was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of dust and something vaguely floral, like potpourri that had long since lost its potency. A tarnished brass mailbox bore her name, freshly printed on a small card, Sarah Walker. It felt official, real. A wave of optimism washed over her, pushing back the anxieties that had been nipping at her heels for weeks. The apartment itself was small, but manageable. A combined living room/kitchen, a tiny bedroom, and a bathroom that clearly hadn't been renovated since the 1970s. But the windows were large, letting in a surprising amount of sunlight, and the hardwood floors, though scuffed and worn, possessed a certain charm. She could work with this, she would work with this. As she began unpacking, she noticed the silence, not a peaceful silence, but a heavy, almost oppressive quiet. No sounds of traffic, no neighbors chatting in the hallway, no distant sirens, just nothing. She chalked it up to the building's age and the thick walls. Maybe it was a good thing. Peace and quiet would be a welcome change from her previous, noisy apartment. That first night, sleep evaded her. The unfamiliar surroundings, the hard mattress, the lingering scent of the previous tenant, it all conspired to keep her awake. She tossed and turned, listening to the building settle around her. Creaks and groans echoed through the walls, like the sighs of an old woman. She imagined the building had seen a lot of history, a lot of lives lived within its walls. Just as she was finally drifting off, she heard it. A faint whisper, barely audible, like a breath against her ear. She couldn't quite make out the words, but it sounded close. Too close. She sat bolt upright in bed, her heart pounding. She strained her ears, listening intently. Nothing. She told herself it was just her imagination, a trick of the sleep-deprived mind. Exhaustion, she reasoned, could play strange tricks on you. She laid back down, determined to ignore it, but the unease lingered, a cold knot in the pit of her stomach. This wasn't just an old building making noises, this was something else, something that whispered in the dark. The following nights were a blur of fitful sleep and escalating anxiety. The whispers persisted. No longer just a faint murmur, but a distinct, hushed voice that seemed to slither into her mind. That it wasn't just a whisper, it was her name being whispered. Sarah. It would breathe, sometimes drawn out and sibilant, other times sharp and abrupt. She tried everything to block it out, earplugs, white noise machines, even sleeping with the television on. Nothing worked. The whisper cut through the noise, a needle piercing through cotton. It was always there, lurking just below the threshold of consciousness, a constant, nagging presence. The lack of sleep began to take its toll. Sarah found herself increasingly irritable, her concentration shot. Her new job, which had initially filled her with so much excitement, now felt like a monumental task. She struggled to focus during meetings, her mind constantly drifting back to the whispers and the unsettling feeling that she was being watched. She started seeing things out of the corner of her eye, fleeting shadows, movements that weren't there. She'd jump at sudden noises, her heart pounding in her chest. The line between reality and her imagination began to blur. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, Sarah decided she couldn't take it anymore. She needed to find out what was going on. She started with the most logical place, the internet. She Googled Grandview Arms, hoping to find some information about the building's history or any reported incidents. The search results were surprisingly sparse. A few mentions in local historical societies, a couple of old newspaper articles about the building's construction in the early 20th century, but nothing significant. Then, she stumbled upon a small article from a local news website. Local woman missing, Emily Carter vanishes without a trace. The article detailed the disappearance of a woman named Emily Carter, who had lived in apartment 3B, Sarah's apartment. Emily had vanished several months prior, leaving behind all her belongings. The police had investigated, but found no signs of forced entry or foul play. The case had gone cold. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. Emily Carter, apartment 3B. Vanished without a trace. It was too much of a coincidence. Could the whispers be connected to Emily's disappearance? Could Emily be trying to communicate with her? She scrolled through the comments section of the article, hoping to find some clues. Most of the comments were expressions of sympathy for Emily's family and friends, but then, she saw one comment that made her blood run cold. "I used to live in that building. There's something not right about that place. Something evil." The comment was anonymous, but it sent a shiver down her spine. She had to know more. She had to find out what happened to Emily Carter. The revelation about Emily Carter fueled Sarah's determination. She had to learn more. The next morning, she decided to speak with Mr. Henderson, the building manager. A wizened old man with a perpetually weary expression and a fondness for suspenders. She'd only exchanged a few brief pleasantries with him so far, but he seemed like the only source of information she had. She found him in his small, cluttered office just off the lobby, surrounded by stacks of papers and overflowing ashtrays. He looked up from his paperwork, his eyes magnified by thick glasses. "Morning, Sarah," he rasped, his voice like sandpaper. "Something I can do for you?" Sarah hesitated, unsure how to broach the subject. "I was just wondering about the previous tenant of my apartment," she began cautiously. "Emily Carter." Mr. Henderson's face clouded over. He sighed heavily, as if the name itself was a burden. "Emily, yes. A sad case. That one. Vanished without a trace. A real shame." Did you know her well?" Sarah asked, trying to sound casual. He shook his head. "Not really. Kept to herself, mostly. Quiet girl, always paid her rent on time, never caused any trouble. That's why it was such a shock when she disappeared." "Did she mention anything unusual before she vanished?" Sarah pressed. "Anything about feeling unwell, or hearing things?" Mr. Henderson frowned. "Hearing things? No, never. If she had, she would have told me. I'm the one who fixes things around here, you know, leaky faucets, broken windows, noisy pipes. But hearing things, no." He paused, then added, almost as an afterthought, "Though I did notice she seemed a bit on edge the last few weeks before she disappeared. A little jumpy, but I just figured she was stressed about something." Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline. "Stressed about what?" He shrugged. "Who knows, life, I suppose. Everyone's got their problems." He leaned back in his chair, his gaze distant. "The police asked me all these questions, of course, searched her apartment top to bottom, found nothing, just gone." Did they find any personal belongings, a journal, perhaps?" Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. Mr. Henderson's eyes narrowed slightly. "Personal belongings, yes, of course. All her stuff was still there, clothes, furniture, books, everything. The family came and took most of it eventually, but I think there might still be some things left in the storage locker in the basement, you know, the ones tenants can rent." A storage locker. The possibility hadn't even crossed her mind. "Do you know which locker was hers?" Sarah asked, her heart pounding. Mr. Henderson hesitated. "I think it was number 14. But I'm not sure. It's been a while." "Why are you so interested, Sarah? You're not thinking of playing detective, are you?" He gave a dry, humorless chuckle. Sarah forced a smile. "Just curious," she said. "I just feel bad for her, and I was wondering if maybe I could help in some way." Mr. Henderson studied her for a moment, his eyes piercing, then, he shrugged again. "Suit yourself," he said. "But be careful, some things are best left buried." Armed with the information about the storage locker, Sarah made her way down to the basement. The air grew colder and damper with each step, the scent of mildew and decay growing stronger. The basement was a labyrinth of dimly lit corridors and cobweb-draped pipes, the silence broken only by the occasional drip of water. She found the storage lockers lining the walls, each marked with a faded number. She scanned the numbers, her heart pounding, until she found it. Locker 14. The lock was old and rusty, but thankfully, not secured. Mr. Henderson probably hadn't bothered to check it since Emily's disappearance. taking a deep breath, Sarah pulled open the locker door that it creaked open with a groan, revealing a small, cramped space filled with dusty boxes and forgotten belongings. The air inside was thick with the smell of mothballs and old paper. She started rummaging through the boxes, her hands trembling. Old clothes, yellowed photographs, outdated textbooks, nothing that seemed particularly significant. But then, in the back of the locker, she found a small, wooden box that was intricately carved with floral patterns and secured with a tarnished brass clasp. With trembling fingers, she opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a journal. Its cover was worn and faded, the pages yellowed with age. Sarah's heart leaped into her throat. This had to be it. Emily's journal. She carefully lifted the journal from the box and flipped it open. The first few pages were filled with neat, legible handwriting. Emily wrote about her daily life, her hopes and dreams, her struggles and frustrations. She seemed like a normal, intelligent, and somewhat lonely young woman. But as Sarah turned the pages, the handwriting began to change. It became more erratic, more hurried, as if Emily was writing in a state of panic. The entries became shorter, more fragmented, filled with paranoia and anxiety. Then, she found it. A single entry, scrawled in large, shaky letters. I hear it. It's whispering my name. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She flipped through the remaining pages, her heart pounding in her chest. The entries became increasingly disturbing, filled with descriptions of the whispers and Emily's growing fear. Finally, the entries devolved into a single phrase, repeated over and over again, filling page after page. Sarah. 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 The blood drained from Sarah's face. She slammed the journal shut, her hands shaking uncontrollably. The whispers weren't just random noises, they were connected to Emily, and somehow, they were connected to her. But why? What did it all mean? She had to get out of the basement. She had to get out of this building. She had to get away from the whispers. Back in her apartment, Sarah slammed the door shut, locking it twice. She leaned against it, gasping for breath, the journal clutched tightly in her hand. She felt a cold dread creeping through her veins, a sense of being watched, of being trapped. She couldn't stay here, not tonight. She needed to get out, to clear her head, to try to make sense of what she had just discovered. But where could she go? She didn't have any friends or family in the city. A hotel, too expensive. Then, she remembered her new job. The office building downtown was open 24/7, with security guards on duty. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than staying in the apartment. Listening to the whispers, grabbing her purse and the journal, Sarah fled the apartment, practically running down the stairs. She didn't even bother to turn off the lights. She just needed to get away. Outside, the city air felt cool and refreshing against her fevered skin. She walked quickly, her eyes darting around, feeling like she was being followed. The streetlights cast long, distorted shadows, making every rustle of leaves sound like a whispered threat. The office building, the security guard, a burly man with a friendly face, greeted her with a smile. "Working late, huh?" he said. Sarah forced a smile in return. "Yeah, just catching up on some things," she mumbled, avoiding eye contact. She took the elevator to her floor and found an empty office cubicle. She sat down, her hands still shaking, and placed the journal on the desk. She stared at it for a long time, afraid to open it again. Finally, she took a deep breath and flipped it open. She needed to understand what was happening. She needed to find some answers. She started rereading the journal from the beginning, paying close attention to every detail. She noticed something she hadn't seen before. In several of the entries, Emily mentioned a recurring dream. A dream about a woman standing in a dark room, whispering a name. A name that wasn't Emily's. The woman in the dream was always shrouded in shadow, her face obscured. But Emily wrote that she could feel the woman's gaze, a cold, penetrating stare that made her skin crawl. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. Could this dream be connected to the whispers? Could it be a clue to what was happening? She continued reading, searching for more clues. She noticed that Emily often mentioned feeling like she was being watched. Even when she was alone, she described a constant sense of unease, a feeling that something was lurking just out of sight. Sarah realized that Emily had been experiencing the same things that she was now experiencing, the whispers, the feeling of being watched, the blurring of reality. It was like she was reliving Emily's nightmare. But why? Why was this happening to her? What was the connection between her and Emily, and what was the significance of her name being whispered in the dark? She knew she had to find out. she had to unravel the mystery of Emily Carter and the whispers before it was too late, before she, too, vanished without a trace. The next day, sleep-deprived and fueled by caffeine, Sarah decided to visit the local library. She needed to delve deeper into the history of the Grandview Arms, hoping to uncover some clue that could explain the whispers and Emily's disappearance. The library was a haven of quiet and order, a stark contrast to the chaos swirling in her mind. She spent hours poring over old newspaper archives, city records, and historical documents, searching for any mention of the building or its past residents. She discovered that the Grandview Arms had been built in 1928. During a period of great prosperity and optimism. It had initially been a luxury apartment building, catering to the city's elite, but over the years, it had fallen into disrepair, its grandeur fading with time. She found several articles about the building's early years, detailing its opulent parties and celebrity residents, but then, she stumbled upon a small, almost forgotten article from 1935. It told the story of a young woman named Eleanor Ainsworth, who had lived in the building and had mysteriously died. The article stated that Eleanor had fallen from her apartment window. A tragic accident, according to the police, but Sarah noticed something odd. The article mentioned that Eleanor had been suffering from a nervous condition and had been hearing voices. In the weeks leading up to her death, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Hearing voices, just like Emily, just like her. Could Eleanor Ainsworth be connected to the whispers? Could she be the shadowy woman in Emily's dream? She searched for more information about Eleanor Ainsworth, but found very little. She was a relatively unknown figure. With no family or friends in the city, her death had been quickly dismissed as an accident, and the case had been closed. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Eleanor Ainsworth was the key to unlocking the mystery. She decided to visit the local historical society, hoping to find more information about her life and death. The historical society was housed in a small, unassuming building, tucked away on a quiet side street. The curator, a kindly old woman with a passion for local history, greeted her warmly. Sarah explained her interest in Eleanor Ainsworth and asked if the society had any records or documents related to her. The curator rummaged through her files for a few minutes, then pulled out a faded folder. "We do have a few items related to Eleanor Ainsworth," she said. "Mostly newspaper clippings and a few photographs, but I don't think there's anything particularly interesting." Sarah eagerly examined the contents of the folder. She found a few photographs of Eleanor, a beautiful young woman with sad eyes and a wistful smile. She also found a few newspaper clippings about her death, confirming the details from the earlier article. But then, she found something that made her heart skip a beat. A small, handwritten note, tucked away at the bottom of the folder. It was addressed to Eleanor Ainsworth and signed with a single initial, M. The note was short and cryptic, but it sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. "They know," it read. "They're watching you. Don't trust anyone." Sarah stared at the note, her mind racing. Who was they? Who was watching Eleanor? And what did they know? She realized that Eleanor Ainsworth's death wasn't an accident. It was a murder, and the whispers were somehow connected to it. She was getting closer to the truth, but she knew that she was also in danger. That night, the whispers were louder, more insistent. They echoed through her apartment, a chorus of voices chanting her name. Sarah. 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 It was as if the building itself was calling out to her. Sleep was impossible. She tossed and turned, her mind racing. The image of Eleanor Ainsworth's sad eyes burned into her memory. She knew she couldn't ignore what she had discovered. She had to find out the truth, no matter the cost. The next morning, she decided to explore the building itself. She started with the attic, hoping to find some forgotten records or documents that could shed light on Eleanor Ainsworth's life and death. The attic was a dusty, cavernous space, filled with cobwebs and forgotten junk. The air was thick with the smell of decay and the silence was deafening. She spent hours searching through old boxes and trunks, her hands covered in dust and grime. She found nothing of significance, just old furniture, broken appliances, and forgotten memories. Disheartened, she was about to give up when she noticed a small, wooden door tucked away in a dark corner. The door was locked, but the lock was old and flimsy. With a little effort, she managed to pry it open. Behind the door was a small, hidden room. The room was bare, except for a single object in the center, a dusty, antique music box. Sarah cautiously approached the music box and lifted the lid. A haunting melody filled the room, a mournful waltz that sent shivers down her spine. As the music played, she noticed something strange. The music box was intricately carved with floral patterns, just like the wooden box that had contained Emily Carter's journal. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. Was this music box connected to Eleanor Ainsworth? Was it a clue to her murder? She carefully examined the music box, searching for any hidden compartments or markings. Then, she noticed something etched into the bottom of the box. A single word, Eleanor. Sarah gasped. This music box had belonged to Eleanor Ainsworth, but why was it hidden away in a secret room in the attic? What was its significance? As the music continued to play, Sarah suddenly felt a presence in the room. She turned around, her heart racing, but she was alone. Or was she? She could feel someone watching her, a cold, malevolent presence that made her skin crawl. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, chanting her name. Sarah. 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 She slammed the music box shut, cutting off the haunting melody. The whispers stopped abruptly, leaving her in a deafening silence. She knew she had to get out of the attic, she had to get away from the music box and the presence that was watching her. She fled the room, slamming the door shut behind her. Back in her apartment, she tried to make sense of what she had discovered: the music box, the secret room, the whispers, the presence. It was all connected somehow, but she couldn't figure out how. She knew she was getting closer to the truth, but she also knew that she was in danger. She was delving into a dark and dangerous world, and she didn't know if she would ever make it out alive. Desperate for answers, Sarah decided to try a different approach. If the whispers were somehow connected to Eleanor Ainsworth and Emily Carter, perhaps she could find a connection between the two women. She knew that Emily had been researching the building's history before she disappeared. Could she have uncovered something about Eleanor Ainsworth? Sarah returned to Emily's journal, rereading it with a new perspective. She searched for any mention of Eleanor's name, any hint that Emily had been investigating her death. She found nothing. Emily's journal focused almost entirely on the whispers and her growing fear. There was no mention of Eleanor Ainsworth or any other historical figures. Disappointed, Sarah was about to give up when she noticed a small, folded piece of paper tucked between the pages of the journal. It was a handwritten note, addressed to Emily. The note was short and cryptic: "The music holds the key, follow the melody." Sarah's heart leaped into her throat. The music box, could it be connected to Emily as well as Eleanor? Could it be the key to unlocking the mystery? She knew she had to return to the attic. She had to examine the music box more closely, to see if she could find any hidden clues. That night, as the whispers grew louder, Sarah crept back up to the attic. The air was even colder and damper than before, the silence even more oppressive. She made her way to the hidden room, her heart pounding in her chest. She hesitated for a moment before opening the door, bracing herself for the presence she had felt before. She opened the door and stepped inside. The room was empty. The music box was gone. Sarah gasped. Where had it gone? Had someone taken it, or had it simply vanished? She searched the room frantically, but the music box was nowhere to be found. She felt a surge of panic. The music box was the key, and now it was gone. As she stood there, defeated, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. A small, almost invisible crack in the wall behind where the music box had been. Sarah cautiously approached the crack and peered inside. It was a narrow opening, leading to a small, hidden space. With trembling fingers, she reached into the opening and pulled out a small object. It was a tarnished silver locket. Sarah opened the locket and gasped. Inside, she found two tiny photographs. One was of Eleanor Ainsworth, the other was of Emily Carter. Sarah stared at the photographs, her mind reeling. Eleanor and Emily, what was the connection between them, and why had their photographs been hidden in a secret space behind the music box? She knew that she was getting closer to the truth, but she also knew that she was in more danger than ever before. She was delving into a dark and twisted world, and she didn't know if she would ever make it out alive. Clutching the locket, Sarah retreated to her apartment, her mind reeling. She needed to understand the connection between Eleanor and Emily. She needed to know why their photographs were hidden together. She examined the locket more closely. It was old and tarnished, but the photographs inside were remarkably well preserved. She studied Eleanor's face, searching for any clue, any hint of her personality or her past. Then, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. In the background of Eleanor's photograph, she could see a faint image of a building. It was difficult to make out, but it looked familiar. Sarah grabbed her laptop and started searching for images of the Grandview Arms. She compared the images to the background of Eleanor's photograph, and her heart skipped a beat. That it was the Grandview Arms. Eleanor Ainsworth had lived in the same building as Emily Carter. Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. This was the connection she had been searching for. Eleanor and Emily were linked by the Grandview Arms, by the whispers, and by something else, something she couldn't quite grasp. She turned her attention to Emily's photograph. It was a recent photograph, taken shortly before she disappeared. Emily looked tired and drawn, her eyes filled with a deep sadness. As Sarah studied the photograph, she noticed something strange. Emily was wearing a necklace. A silver chain with a small, heart-shaped pendant. Sarah gasped. The pendant was identical to the one she had found in the storage locker, the one that had contained Emily's journal. She grabbed the pendant from her desk and compared it to the one in the photograph. They were exactly the same. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. Emily had been wearing the pendant when she disappeared, and now, she had it. What did it mean? Was the pendant a clue? Was it a symbol of something? She decided to examine the pendant more closely. She ran her fingers over its smooth surface, searching for any hidden markings or inscriptions. Then, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. A tiny, almost invisible scratch on the back of the pendant. Sarah squinted at the scratch, trying to make out its shape. It looked like a letter. A letter M. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. M. The same initial that had signed the cryptic note to Eleanor Ainsworth. Could it be the same person? Could M be the key to unlocking the mystery? She knew she had to find out who M was. She had to find out what M knew about Eleanor Ainsworth and Emily Carter. She had to find out what M had to do with the whispers. But how? Where could she start? As she sat there, lost in thought, she heard a faint scratching sound coming from the wall. Sarah froze. She listened intently, her heart pounding in her chest. The scratching sound grew louder, more insistent. It was coming from inside the wall. Sarah felt a surge of terror. Something was inside the wall, something was watching her. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, chanting her name. Sarah. 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 She knew she was no longer alone. She was being hunted, and she didn't know where to turn. Frozen with fear, Sarah slowly backed away from the wall, her eyes darting around the room. The scratching sound continued, growing louder, more frantic. It was as if something was trying to break through. She grabbed a heavy lamp from the table and held it in front of her, ready to defend herself. The whispers intensified, swirling around her, chanting her name. Sarah. 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 Suddenly, the scratching stopped. The room fell silent. Sarah held her breath, listening intently. Then, she heard a faint voice, whispering her name from inside the wall. Sarah. The voice was weak and raspy, barely audible, but it was definitely her name. Sarah's blood ran cold. What was happening? Was she hallucinating? Was she losing her mind? She took a deep breath and forced herself to speak. "Who's there?" she asked, her voice trembling. The voice remained silent for a moment, then, it whispered again. "Help me." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. "Who are you?" she asked. "What do you want?" The voice whispered again, its tone desperate. M. M knows. Find M. Then, the voice fell silent, the scratching stopped, the whispers faded away. Sarah stood there, frozen with fear, the lamp still clutched in her hand. She didn't know what to do, she didn't know who to trust. She knew that she was in grave danger. She was being hunted by something, or someone, that wanted to silence her. She had to find M. She had to find out what M knew about Eleanor Ainsworth and Emily Carter. She had to stop the whispers before it was too late. But how? Where could she start? She looked around the room, searching for any clue, any hint of where to turn. Then, her eyes fell on the locket with the photographs of Eleanor and Emily, the locket that had been hidden behind the music box. Sarah realized that the locket was the key. It was the link between Eleanor and Emily, between the past and the present. She decided to examine the photographs again, searching for any detail she might have missed. She studied Eleanor's face, her sad eyes, her wistful smile. Then, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. In the background of Eleanor's photograph, she could see a faint sign. It was a small, almost illegible sign, hanging on the wall of a building. Sarah squinted at the sign, trying to make out the words. Then, she recognized it. That it was the sign for a local antique shop. A shop she had seen in the neighborhood. Sarah's heart leaped into her throat. Could this be it? Could this be the clue she had been searching for? She knew she had to visit the antique shop. She had to find out if it had any connection to Eleanor Ainsworth or Emily Carter. She had to find out if M was involved. She grabbed her purse and the locket and fled the apartment. Desperate to escape the whispers and the presence that was watching her, she knew she was taking a risk, but she had no choice. She had to find the truth, no matter the cost. The antique shop was located in a quiet, forgotten corner of the city, its windows filled with dusty relics and forgotten treasures. The sign above the door read, Millicent's Curios, the lettering faded and peeling. Sarah hesitated before entering. A sense of foreboding washing over her. She didn't know what she was walking into, but she knew she had to do it. She pushed open the door and stepped inside. A bell chimed above her head, announcing her arrival. The shop was dimly lit and cluttered, the air thick with the scent of old paper and mothballs. Shelves lined the walls, filled with antique furniture, porcelain dolls, and dusty books. Behind the counter, a wizened old woman with piercing blue eyes looked up from her knitting. She wore a long, flowing dress and a silver necklace with a large, ornate pendant. "Can I help you, dear?" she asked, her voice raspy but kind. Sarah took a deep breath and forced herself to speak. "I'm looking for information about a woman named Eleanor Ainsworth," she said. "She used to live in the Grandview Arms." The old woman's eyes narrowed slightly. "Eleanor Ainsworth," she repeated, her voice thoughtful. "That's a name I haven't heard in a long time. Did you know her?" Sarah asked, her heart pounding in her chest. The old woman nodded slowly. "Yes, I knew her. She used to come into my shop all the time. She was a lovely girl, but very troubled." "Troubled how?" Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. The old woman sighed. "She was hearing voices, seeing things that weren't there. She thought someone was watching her." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. That it was the same story all over again. Eleanor, Emily, and now her. Did she ever mention anyone named M? Sarah asked. The old woman's eyes widened. "M," she repeated, her voice trembling. "How do you know about M?" "She sent Eleanor a note," Sarah explained. "It said, they know that they're watching you. Don't trust anyone." The old woman gasped. "That's terrible," she said. M was a very dangerous person. He was obsessed with Eleanor. He thought she was possessed by a demon. "Who was M?" Sarah asked, her voice desperate. The old woman hesitated for a moment, then, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "M was her doctor," she said. "Dr. Malcolm Reed." Sarah felt a surge of terror. Dr. Malcolm Reed, the name sounded familiar. Then, she remembered. Dr. Malcolm Reed had been the doctor who had signed Eleanor Ainsworth's death certificate, the doctor who had ruled her death an accident. Sarah realized that she was facing a dangerous enemy. A doctor who was obsessed with Eleanor Ainsworth, who thought she was possessed by a demon, and who had ruled her death an accident. She had to find out more about Dr. Malcolm Reed. She had to find out why he had lied about Eleanor's death. She had to stop him before he hurt anyone else. But how? Where could she start? The old woman looked at Sarah with a knowing expression. "You're in danger, dear," she said. "You need to be careful. Dr. Reed is a very powerful man." "I know," Sarah said. "But I have to find out the truth. I have to stop him." The old woman nodded slowly. "I can help you," she said. "I know where Dr. Reed is. I know where he's been hiding." "He's been hiding in an old sanitarium just outside the city," Millicent said, her voice low and grave. "It's called Blackwood Asylum. It's been abandoned for years, but I know he's there." Sarah felt a surge of fear, but also a sense of determination. She had to confront Dr. Reed. She had to find out the truth about Eleanor and Emily. "Will you take me there?" she asked. Millicent hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. "I will, but be warned, dear, Blackwood Asylum is a dark and dangerous place, and Dr. Reed is not a man to be trifled with." They set off for Blackwood Asylum in Millicent's ancient, beat-up car. The drive was long and silent, the only sound the rumble of the engine and the rustling of the wind. As they drove, Millicent told Sarah more about Dr. Reed. He had been a brilliant but eccentric doctor, obsessed with the occult and with the idea of demonic possession. He had believed that Eleanor Ainsworth was possessed by a powerful demon, and he had tried to cure her through unconventional and often brutal methods. When Eleanor died, Dr. Reed had been discredited and ostracized by the medical community. He had disappeared shortly thereafter, and no one had seen him since. As they approached Blackwood Asylum, the landscape grew bleak and desolate, the trees were gnarled and bare. The sky was dark and ominous. The asylum itself was a hulking, Gothic structure. Its windows boarded up and its walls covered in ivy. It looked like something out of a horror movie. "Are you sure this is the place?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling, as the car lurched down the long, overgrown driveway. Millicent nodded grimly. "This is it," she said. "Blackwood Asylum. Be careful, Sarah, this place is evil." They parked the car in front of the asylum's imposing entrance. The heavy wooden doors were chained shut, but Millicent had a set of bolt cutters in the trunk. She quickly cut through the chains, and they pushed open the doors, stepping into the darkness. The air inside the asylum was cold and damp, filled with the stench of decay and despair. The silence was broken only by the drip, drip, drip of water echoing through the halls. They made their way through the asylum's labyrinthine corridors, their footsteps echoing through the empty rooms. The walls were covered in peeling paint and graffiti, the floors were littered with broken glass and debris. As they walked, Sarah began to experience strange sensations. She felt like she was being watched, like there were eyes on her from every corner. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, chanting her name. "Sarah! Sarah! Sarah!" She also began to see things that weren't there, fleeting shadows, ghostly figures, faces in the darkness. She wasn't sure if she was hallucinating, or if the asylum was somehow affecting her mind. "Are you seeing things, dear?" Millicent asked, her voice strained. Sarah shook her head, trying to clear her mind. "I don't know," she said. "I'm not sure what's real anymore." They continued their search, making their way deeper into the asylum. They explored the abandoned patient rooms, the dilapidated operating theaters, and the crumbling recreation halls. In one of the patient rooms, they found a collection of old medical records. Sarah frantically searched through the records, looking for any mention of Eleanor Ainsworth or Dr. Malcolm Reed. She found several records pertaining to Dr. Reed's patients, but none of them mentioned Eleanor. She was about to give up when she stumbled upon a file labeled Patient X. The file was heavily redacted, with most of the information blacked out, but Sarah could make out a few key details. Patient X had been admitted to the asylum in 1935, the same year that Eleanor Ainsworth had died. Patient X had been suffering from severe delusions and hallucinations, and had claimed to be possessed by a demon. The file also mentioned that Patient X had been treated by Dr. Malcolm Reed. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Patient X. Could it be Eleanor Ainsworth? Had Dr. Reed faked her death and imprisoned her in the asylum? She continued reading the file, her heart pounding in her chest. Then, she found something that made her blood run cold. A single sentence, scrawled in Dr. Reed's handwriting. "Patient X is convinced that someone is whispering her name." Sarah gasped. It was the same thing that had happened to Eleanor, to Emily, and to her. The whispers, they were all connected. She turned to Millicent, her eyes wide with fear. "I think I know what's going on," she said. "I think Eleanor Ainsworth was never really dead. I think Dr. Reed imprisoned her in this asylum, and she's been haunting it ever since." Millicent looked at Sarah with a skeptical expression. "That's impossible, dear," she said. "Eleanor Ainsworth is dead. I saw her funeral." Sarah shook her head. "I don't think so," she said. "I think Dr. Reed faked her death and imprisoned her in this asylum, and I think she's been trying to communicate with us, trying to tell us the truth." Suddenly, they heard a loud banging sound coming from the other end of the hallway. They froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. They exchanged a nervous glance, then slowly made their way towards the sound. As they rounded the corner, they saw him. Dr. Malcolm Reed. He was standing in the middle of the hallway, his back to them, wearing a long, white coat. He was banging on a metal door with a hammer, his movements frantic and erratic. "Dr. Reed?" Sarah called out, her voice trembling. Dr. Reed stopped banging and slowly turned around. His face was pale and gaunt, his eyes wild and bloodshot that he looked like a madman. "Who's there?" he asked, his voice raspy and strained. "What do you want?" "We know about Eleanor Ainsworth," Sarah said, her voice firm. "We know what you did to her." Dr. Reed's eyes widened with fear. "You don't know anything," he said. "Eleanor was possessed by a demon that I was trying to save her." "You didn't save her," Sarah said. "You imprisoned her in this asylum, and you faked her death, you tortured her, and you drove her mad." Dr. Reed shook his head, his eyes filled with tears. "No," he said. "You don't understand that I was trying to help her. The demon was too strong that it wouldn't let her go." "What demon?" Sarah asked. "There's no demon, Dr. Reed. There's just you. You're the demon." Dr. Reed lunged at Sarah, his eyes filled with rage. Millicent quickly stepped in front of her, blocking his path. "Get away from her, you monster," Millicent said, her voice strong and resolute. Dr. Reed shoved Millicent aside and grabbed Sarah by the arm. He dragged her towards the metal door, his grip tight and painful. "I'm going to show you the truth," he said, his voice hoarse. "I'm going to show you the demon that possessed Eleanor." He threw open the metal door and pushed Sarah inside. The door slammed shut behind her, plunging her into darkness. Sarah stumbled blindly in the darkness, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear Dr. Reed's maniacal laughter echoing from the hallway. "Welcome to my laboratory," he cackled. "Here, you will see the truth. Here, you will understand the power of the demon." Suddenly, the lights flickered on, revealing a gruesome scene. The room was filled with medical equipment, surgical instruments, and strange, arcane symbols. In the center of the room, chained to a table, was a figure covered in a white sheet. Dr. Reed approached the figure, his eyes gleaming with madness. "Behold," he said, his voice triumphant. "The demon that possessed Eleanor Ainsworth." He pulled back the sheet, revealing a skeletal figure, its eyes hollow and empty. It was a corpse. Sarah gasped in horror. It was Eleanor Ainsworth. "She's dead," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "You killed her." "No," Dr. Reed said. "I freed her. I released her from the demon's grasp." He turned to Sarah, his eyes filled with a chilling intensity. "And now," he said, "I'm going to free you." He grabbed a scalpel from the table and advanced towards Sarah, his eyes fixed on her. Sarah screamed and tried to run, but she was trapped. There was nowhere to go. Just as Dr. Reed was about to reach her, the door burst open and Millicent rushed into the room, wielding a heavy metal pipe. She swung the pipe at Dr. Reed, hitting him squarely on the head. He crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Millicent rushed to Sarah's side and freed her from the room. They fled the asylum, leaving Dr. Reed behind. Back in Millicent's car, Sarah sat